The ground shook like thunder. Kale's boots slipped on the jagged rocks as a deafening roar split the air. He barely had time to raise his arms before a shadow passed over him, a massive winged shape that blotted out the sun. Smoke curled from the horizon, and the smell of sulfur burned his nose. The red dragon pack had come. Kale's heart hammered. Behind him, his small village lay in ruins, blackened beams jutting like broken teeth from the earth. He had survived the last attack by sheer luck and a quick mind, but now there was no time to think. The dragons circled, eyes like molten gold, teeth glinting in the fading light. Each step they took shook loose rocks down the cliffs. He clenched his spear tighter. He had no weapons capable of killing them, only enough skill and wit to survive. His mind raced. One wrong move and he would be ash in seconds. Yet even as fear coiled in his chest, another sound pulled him forward, soft, irregular, almost like a whisper against the roar of wings. Kale froze. He looked down. Between his legs, tangled in the folds of his jacket, were small, shimmering shapes. Dragon hatchlings. Their scales glowed faintly red, even in the shadow of their parents' fury. They were asleep, huddled against him, tiny breaths puffing smoke in the cold air. His stomach dropped. The pack wasn't coming for him, they were coming for these hatchlings. But why were they here asleep on him? Kale had no answer. Only instinct. A massive claw slammed into the cliff beside him, sending sparks flying. Kale jumped back, dragging the hatchlings with him, rolling behind a jagged boulder. The largest dragon, Rathkar the Alpha, landed with a thud that shook the ground beneath Kale. Smoke poured from Rathkar's nostrils as his gaze swept the cliff, sharp and searching. Kale's mind fired through every lesson he had learned surviving these creatures. He couldn't fight. He couldn't outrun them across the cliffside. But he could think. He could act. He could protect the hatchlings. Slowly, carefully, Kale raised his voice, soft but firm. He hummed a tune, one he had improvised in the last attack, a pitch similar to the calls of baby dragons. At first nothing happened. Rathkar bared his teeth, a low rumble shaking the rocks. Then, faintly, one of the hatchlings stirred, flicking its tiny wings. Kale's chest tightened. He dared a glance at the Alpha. Rathkar tilted his massive head, confusion and instinct battling in his glowing eyes. Kale held the humming steady, careful to match the rhythms he had learned from observing dragons before. Another dragon landed, smaller than Rathkar but equally fearsome. Its claws dug deep grooves in the rock as it growled. Kale shifted the hatchlings slightly, pressing them closer to his chest, whispering calm words. He felt a small warmth from them, tiny vibrations of trust, or maybe fear. Either way, it was something he could work with. A sudden screech split the air. Kale jumped. One hatchling had rolled free of his jacket and tumbled onto the edge of the cliff. Without thinking, he lunged, catching it just as Rathkar's claw scraped the stone behind him. His heart pounded, sweat stinging his eyes. The pack froze. The Alpha's gaze locked on Kale's hands, then on the hatchling, then back on him. Hesitation. Kale took a slow, careful breath. He shifted, positioning himself between the hatchlings and the dragons. His mind calculated, every step measured. He knew the dragons were intelligent, driven by instinct, by bonds with their young. If he could show respect, patience, maybe he could survive. Maybe he could protect the babies. Then a new sound. A high-pitched shriek sharper than the rest. Kale's eyes widened. From the cliff's shadow, a strange figure moved. Its scales shimmered differently, silver and black, eyes too intelligent for a wild creature. It wasn't part of the pack, but it was coming. Both dragons and humans froze. Kale's chest tightened. He could feel the hatchling's tiny claws digging into his shirt. If this creature attacked, it wouldn't care about him or the babies, it would kill first, decide later. He gripped the closest rock and rolled to face it, keeping the hatchlings shielded. The dragons hissed, wings beating, smoke and heat mixing. Time slowed. Kale's mind raced. Move, defend, survive. His heart hammered louder than the wings. He had survived impossible odds before, but never like this. Never with tiny dragon lives literally in his hands. The silver-black figure stepped into the fading light. Its eyes fixed on Kale. Its mouth opened slightly, not a roar but a whispering hiss, as if it knew something only he could understand. The Alpha growled, claws scraping the cliff. Kale froze, realizing the fight had changed. The danger was no longer just the red dragon pack, it was the unknown creature, and whatever choice it had brought him to. A bead of sweat ran down Kale's temple. He pressed the hatchlings closer. One tiny dragon twitched, its glowing eyes opening. Kale swallowed, knowing that in the next heartbeat, everything could change. Then Rathkar's roar shattered the cliffside silence, louder than before as if calling for war, or warning. Kale's eyes met the Alpha's and in that instant he understood, the fight was far from over. Survival would demand every ounce of courage, intelligence and heart he had, and the next move would decide everything. And just as Kale readied himself, the strange silver-black figure moved forward, toward him. Kale's lungs burned from the climb, his muscles screaming with tension, but there was no time to rest. The red dragon pack had landed fully on the cliff, wings folded now, but every scale and claw was tense, ready to strike. The hatchlings on his chest stirred again, tiny claws digging in, frightened by the shifting adults. Rathkar, the massive alpha, stepped forward. His golden eyes glowed like molten metal, fixed on Kale with a mix of fury and confusion. Every step he took sent rocks tumbling down the cliff, and the wind from his wings pushed Kale against the jagged stones. Behind Rathkar, other dragons huddled, smoke curling from their nostrils. Some hissed at Kale, some at each other, a brewing storm of instinct and fury. Kale's mind raced. He could not fight them. One swipe, one snap of those claws and the hatchlings, and he would be crushed instantly. But he could think. He could act. He had survived before by staying smarter than the predators around him. He whispered to the tiny dragons again, humming in the pitch of their soft calls. One of them twitched, wings trembling, and pressed against him more firmly. That small connection gave Kale a spark of hope. A smaller dragon, barely grown but no less dangerous, lunged suddenly, not at him but toward the cliff's edge. Kale's eyes followed instinctively and saw movement, another creature. This one was unlike anything he had ever seen. Sleek, silver-black scales that shimmered with an almost metallic sheen, eyes intelligent and calculating. It moved with unnatural grace, stepping closer to the hatchlings. Kale froze, realizing that the pack's attention was now divided. Some dragons hesitated, uncertain whether to attack the stranger or protect the young. Kale swallowed hard and made a choice. He could not let the hatchlings fall into danger. With a quick step, he shifted behind a jagged rock, using it as cover and carefully placed his hand over the nearest hatchling, shielding it from the approaching creature. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Every second mattered. The silver-black creature hissed softly, low and almost melodic. Kale felt a strange familiarity, a whisper in the sound that seemed to call to him. The dragons, noticing this, paused. Even Rathkar's roar softened into a deep rumble. Kale's mind worked faster than it had in years. The creature wasn't attacking, yet. It was observing, testing. He needed to survive long enough to find out why. A rock shifted under Kale's foot, sending a small shower of debris toward the alpha. Rathkar snapped his head, nostrils flaring. Kale froze, but then slowly, carefully he did something unexpected. He clapped his hands softly just once and sang a short, steady note, a mimic of the hatchling's calls he had improvised before. One of the tiny dragons twitched, and the others followed, their tiny eyes opening to stare at him. A shock ran through Kale. Rathkar paused mid-step, his massive head tilting as he watched the display. The smaller dragons around him hesitated, unsure whether to follow instinct or curiosity. Kale realized something dangerous and remarkable at the same time. The pack was divided. Instinct to attack, loyalty to their young, and curiosity about this human clashed visibly in their golden eyes. He had a tiny fleeting advantage and he knew it. Kale's hand brushed the hatchling nearest him, feeling the delicate scales beneath his fingers. He whispered, "Stay close, trust me." The hatchling shivered but did not move. He had never felt such responsibility. One wrong choice and he would lose everything. But Kale's courage did not falter. He had faced death before and he would do it again if it meant protecting these fragile lives. Then, without warning, the silver-black creature stepped fully into the light. Its eyes locked on Kale, unblinking, almost judging. Kale felt a strange chill, realizing it might be smarter than any dragon he had encountered. Its movements were fluid, calculated, each step deliberate. His mind screamed, fight, run, protect, the instinctive trifecta that had kept him alive. Rathkar growled low, the vibration rattling the stones. The alpha shifted closer to Kale, body coiled like a spring, wings braced. Kale's grip on the hatchlings tightened. He had no plan to attack, he had a plan to survive. Slowly, carefully, he stepped forward a fraction, maintaining eye contact with Rathkar. His voice was soft but firm, humming again. One of the adult dragons hissed sharply, snapping out of confusion, but Rathkar raised a wing as if to hold it back. Kale noticed something small but critical, a glowing mineral among the rocks near the hatchlings. From previous encounters, he remembered dragons being drawn to strange stones, even instinctively. Without breaking focus on Rathkar, he scooped it up and held it in front of the hatchlings. Their tiny bodies stirred, eyes glowing faintly as they instinctively moved toward the stone. The adults' heads turned sharply, confusion rippling through the pack. Rathkar's roar was still deep, still threatening, but his body language softened just slightly. The smaller dragons tensed, unsure what to do next. Kale exhaled quietly. It was not victory, but it was a pause, a crack in the danger, a chance to breathe. A hatchling nudged Kale's chest and let out a soft, high-pitched chirp. He smiled faintly, though sweat stung his eyes. One small act of trust. One tiny connection. That was all he had, but it was enough to make the dragons hesitate. And then, with a sudden, terrifying burst, Rathkar's wings flared, sending stones flying, the ground shaking violently. The silver-black creature hissed again, louder this time, and moved closer. Kale's stomach sank. The pause was over. The real test had begun. He had kept the hatchlings alive this far, but the next moment could cost them all. Kale pressed himself tighter against the rocks, heart pounding. He whispered again, "Stay close, we're not done yet." The pack's eyes blazed, the cliff trembling beneath him, and the strange creature froze, watching, waiting. He had survived the first wave of chaos, but nothing had prepared him for what was coming next. Kale's chest heaved, sweat stinging his eyes, as the cliff trembled beneath the dragon's weight. He had kept the hatchlings alive this far, but every moment felt like walking on a knife's edge. Rathkar, massive and golden-eyed, was circling again, muscles coiled, claws digging into stone. Kale knew instinctively that the alpha would strike if he faltered. Then he noticed something unusual. One of the hatchlings twitched more than the others. Its scales glowed brighter, red veins running in patterns Kale hadn't seen before. He leaned closer, careful not to make a threatening move. The hatchling's eyes opened, shimmering like liquid fire. And for a heartbeat it looked at him, not just with instinct but with something else. Recognition? Intelligence? Leadership? Kale's mind raced. The others began to stir as well. Tiny wings flicked nervously, but they didn't scatter. They didn't cry out. They remained on his chest. That was impossible. Dragon young normally fled at any threat. Yet these ones seemed to have chosen him. A shiver ran down Kale's spine. He realized the truth. These hatchlings were not ordinary. They were the next leaders of the pack, rare mutation-born alphas, and somehow they were trusting a human. Kale's first thought was strategy. He could not fight Rathkar directly, but if he could show respect to the hatchlings he might influence the pack. Slowly he reached for the glowing mineral at his feet. It pulsed faintly in his hand and instinctively he held it toward the babies. The smallest one nudged forward, wings twitching, drawn to the light. Kale whispered softly, "It's safe. Trust me." The pack's adults tensed. Rathkar's head lowered slightly, nostrils flaring. He did not advance. He seemed confused, torn between instinct to strike and instinct to protect the young. Kale saw an opening. The pack's division was visible in their eyes and posture. A decision had to be made quickly. He stepped forward, hands slow and steady, holding the mineral above his head. Not a weapon, not a threat. He hummed again, the sound deep and resonant, almost matching the rhythm of the hatchling's breaths. One of the babies clambered over his arm and pressed against his chest. Kale froze. The pack stiffened, watching every move. His heart pounded. One wrong gesture, one false note, and everything would be over. And then it happened. Rathkar hissed, not in anger but almost curiosity. He stepped back slightly, wings spreading just enough to block other adults from rushing forward. The silver-black creature, still silent, watched intently. Kale realized it was not attacking. It was observing, perhaps judging whether he was worthy. Kale swallowed hard. His mind spun. He had survived attacks before, but this was something else entirely. Survival was no longer enough. He had to act, not with force but with intelligence, with empathy. He gathered the hatchlings closer and spoke in low tones, mimicking their chirps and clicks. One by one their bodies relaxed. The glow from the mineral pulsed softly, and the babies leaned against him, their small scales brushing his chest. Something incredible happened. The pack shifted. The smaller dragons hesitated, some lowering their heads, sniffing the air, unsure whether to obey instinct or follow the new signal. Rathkar's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Kale saw uncertainty in the alpha's massive gaze. It was as if the dragon were thinking, not just reacting. Kale felt a rush of both fear and exhilaration. He had created a pause in the pack's aggression, a small victory, but it might be all they had. Then a screech shattered the moment. A gust of wind brought dust and debris, and Kale realized one of the hatchlings had rolled free from his jacket, teetering on the edge of the cliff. Reflexively, he lunged, catching the tiny dragon just as Rathkar's claw scraped the stone inches away. The pack froze again, tension crackling like lightning. Kale pressed the hatchling to his chest, whispering reassurance. He could feel the creature's tiny heartbeat against his own. It was a moment of trust. A single, fragile connection that held the line between life and death. Kale realized the hatchling's choice was not just instinct, it was deliberate. They were giving him a chance, a bond that could sway the pack. He had to seize it. Kale made a decision. Slowly, he stepped toward Rathkar, keeping his body low and unthreatening. The hatchlings on his chest stirred but stayed close as if guiding him. Rathkar's wings flared slightly, and a low rumble vibrated through the cliff. Kale raised the glowing mineral higher, showing it not as a weapon, but as a symbol, a beacon for the hatchlings and a signal to the adults that he understood their world. The silver-black creature hissed softly, stepping closer, its eyes locked on Kale. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. Kale's mind raced. This being was not a dragon, not exactly. It was something else, something that might hold the key to why the hatchlings had bonded with him. Then, in a sudden, breathtaking moment, one of the hatchlings leapt from Kale's chest onto the cliff between him and Rathkar. It chirped sharply, wings fluttering, and the other hatchlings followed. The alpha froze, watching his young in awe or confusion. The smaller dragons hesitated, unsure whether to attack or follow. Kale's chest tightened. The pack's division was complete. His gamble had worked. But it was dangerous. Any misstep now and Rathkar could unleash fury that would crush them all. Kale pressed the hatchlings closer, whispering encouragement. He had turned the tide, but the real challenge was just beginning. And then the silver-black creature moved forward, closer than before, its gaze unwavering. Kale realized it was not here by accident. Whatever this being was, it had chosen this moment, this human, and these hatchlings for a reason. The next move would change everything, and nothing would be the same again. Kale tightened his grip, swallowed hard, and prepared to make the boldest choice of his life. The cliff trembled, the pack's eyes followed, and the unknown watcher waited. The gamble had begun. Kale's muscles burned, his heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. The cliff trembled beneath Rathkar's massive weight. Dust and debris swirled, smoke curling from the dragon's nostrils. Every second counted. One wrong move, one sudden snap of claws and the hatchlings, and he would be gone. He pressed the tiny dragons closer to his chest. They clung to him, wings trembling, scales warm against his skin. Their trust gave him a spark of courage. He could not fail. Not now. Not after everything. Rathkar's golden eyes burned with fury, his head lowered, teeth bared. The alpha's roar split the air, shaking loose rocks and sending smaller dragons skittering in panic. Kale's mind raced. He had learned that the dragons were intelligent, capable of hesitation, capable of choice. If he acted wisely, he could turn their instincts against their rage. His eyes flicked to the glowing mineral in his hand, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. An idea sparked. Not a weapon. Not a trap. A signal. He held it high and hummed in the pitch of the hatchling's calls. The smallest one twitched, then another and another. The baby's tiny wings fluttered, their glowing scales brightening. Kale stepped forward, chest low, eyes locked on Rathkar. The alpha growled, massive wings flaring, smoke curling from his nostrils. The smaller dragons tensed, circling, unsure whether to attack or follow instinct. The silver-black creature watched silently, its gaze unblinking, almost expectant. Kale knew he had only one chance. He let the mineral pulse brighter, matching the rhythm of the hatchling's tiny heartbeats. Then, slowly, carefully, he placed the hatchlings one by one on the cliff edge between him and Rathkar. Their tiny claws dug into the stone as they chirped softly. The pack froze. The alpha lowered his massive head, nostrils flaring. Something inside him hesitated. The instinct to attack battled with the instinct to protect his young. Kale held his breath. Sweat stung his eyes, his chest tight, his fingers trembling. Then Rathkar roared again, louder than before, wings slashing the air. Rocks tumbled down the cliffside. Kale stepped back instinctively, shielding the hatchlings with his body. The alpha lunged, not at him, but at the glowing mineral, claws snapping inches from Kale's hands. Kale rolled to the side, holding the babies tight, and tossed the stone high into the air. A blinding pulse erupted as it hit the cliff. Light spread in waves, and the hatchlings flapped their wings, shimmering brilliantly. Rathkar froze mid-step. The smaller dragons hesitated, uncertain. The silver-black creature hissed, taken aback. Kale's heart thundered. He had created a pause, a moment of shock that could change everything. The Alpha's massive head tilted. Then, impossibly, Hrathkar lowered his wings slightly, a subtle gesture of acknowledgement. The smaller dragons followed suit, unsure but cautious. Kale exhaled quietly. He had survived the first attack. He had earned a fragment of respect. But the danger was far from over. Hrathkar's eyes, molten and burning, scanned the cliff. One massive claw scraped the stone. The Alpha's nostrils flared. Kale knew the next second could undo everything. The silver-black creature stepped closer, hissing softly. It was testing him, judging him, waiting for him to fail. Kale's mind worked faster than ever. He could not fight. He could not flee. He had to act with intelligence, with empathy. Slowly, deliberately, he shifted the hatchlings so they faced the Alpha. One tiny dragon chirped sharply, wings fluttering. Another followed. Their glowing scales pulsed in unison, casting a soft red light across the cliff. Hrathkar blinked. The Alpha's massive head lowered even further, nostrils brushing the stone, eyes wide with disbelief. Kale realized something impossible. The dragons were listening. The pack's instincts to protect their young had overridden their rage. For the first time in history, or at least in Kale's life, a human had matched a dragon's fury with intelligence and heart. Kale's fingers brushed the smallest hatchling. Its warmth flowed through him, a tiny heartbeat echoing in his chest. He whispered softly, "We're not enemies, not if you trust me." The pack's heads shifted, some closer, some hesitating, smoke curling from nostrils. Every scale, every claw, every wing trembled with tension. Suddenly, the silver-black creature hissed sharply and leaped forward, faster than Kale could track. Hrathkar's roar split the air. The Alpha lunged, claws snapping. Kale reacted instantly. He threw himself forward, covering the hatchlings with his body, rolling just as Hrathkar's claws slammed inches above them. The ground trembled. Rocks flew. Dust clouded the air. For a heartbeat, silence. Kale's chest heaved, sweat and dust stinging his eyes. Slowly the dust cleared. Hrathkar's massive head hovered over him, eyes locked. The Alpha lowered his wings entirely, body coiled but tense. The silver-black creature froze, watching. Kale's heart raced. He had survived. The hatchlings chirped softly, still pressed against him, wings trembling. Hrathkar's rumble vibrated through the cliff, a sound not of attack but of reluctant acknowledgement. Kale exhaled. He had done it. But then a new rumble came from the horizon, faint at first, growing steadily. The cliff trembled again. Hrathkar lifted his head, nostrils flaring. The pack stiffened, wings raising defensively. Kale's chest tightened. The fight was over for now, but something older, something larger, was awakening. He pressed the hatchlings closer, whispering softly. His hands shook, but he had a spark of triumph. A human had survived, had outsmarted dragons, had earned a fraction of their trust. But the pulse of danger in the horizon promised the next challenge. Kale looked up at Hrathkar. The Alpha's eyes, molten and alive, met his. No words were spoken, but Kale knew. This was only the beginning. Survival had been a choice, courage had been a weapon, and intelligence had been a shield. But what awaited beyond the horizon might demand more than he had ever faced before. And then the silver-black creature hissed again, moving toward the glowing hatchlings, eyes glinting with something unreadable. Kale realized with a shock that the next move might not come from the dragons, or from him, but from something older and smarter than either. The cliff trembled once more. Kale's heartbeat thundered. The red dragon pack was tensed, the hatchlings clung to him, and the unknown watcher waited. Every instinct screamed danger. Every thought demanded action. The next second could change everything, or end it all. Kale pressed the hatchlings closer to his chest, their tiny hearts beating rapidly against his own. The cliff trembled, dust swirling around them, but something in the air had shifted. Hrathkar's golden eyes softened slightly, the Alpha lowering his massive head until it nearly touched Kale's shoulder. The smaller dragons around him mimicked the gesture, uncertainty mixing with curiosity. For the first time, Kale realized that he wasn't just surviving, he was being acknowledged. The silver-black creature hovered silently, its eyes glinting with intelligence. It tilted its head, observing the tiny dragons, then Kale. Its hiss was low, almost approving. Kale's mind raced. This being was not a simple predator. It was a guardian, or maybe a test. Whatever it was, it had brought him here for a reason, and now it was waiting to see if he had earned the chance to protect the hatchlings. Kale exhaled, steadying his breath. He spoke softly in the humming tone he had been using all along. "It's okay. We're safe, together." One of the hatchlings nudged his chest and chirped softly. Kale smiled despite the tension. They had survived the first wave of danger, and more than that, they had chosen him. That tiny choice, made by creatures not yet fully grown, was proof of something remarkable. Humans could earn trust, even from the most impossible of creatures. Rathkar shifted, a low rumble vibrating through the cliff. Then, slowly, deliberately, the Alpha nudged one of the hatchlings with his massive snout, guiding it gently back to Kale. The smaller dragons followed, some sniffing the human cautiously, others watching the silver-black creature. Kale realized he had done what no human before had. He had gained the trust of a dragon pack, not through strength but through courage, intelligence, and compassion. But there was no time to celebrate. The ground beneath them shook again, more violently this time, and Kale's eyes flicked toward the horizon. A deep, rumbling roar echoed through the valley below, carrying a weight that made even Rathkar stiffen. The silver-black creature hissed sharply, stepping forward, wings spread wide. Kale's stomach tightened. Whatever was coming, it was larger, older, and far more dangerous than the pack before him. Kale hugged the hatchlings tighter, whispering encouragement. He had learned a crucial truth. Courage was not the absence of fear, but action despite it. And intelligence was not just cleverness, it was understanding the world, reading creatures and events, and making choices no one else could see. He had survived impossible odds so far, but the next challenge would test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Rathkar roared, not with rage this time, but with a sound that resonated like a warning. The Alpha's wings lifted slightly, protective, forming a barrier between Kale and the unknown danger beyond. The smaller dragons followed suit. Even the silver-black creature remained poised, tense but not attacking. Kale understood the unspoken message. They were forming a fragile alliance. A faint glow emanated from the hatchling's scales, pulsing with their heartbeat, reflecting the mineral Kale had used. The dragons, adult and young, seemed to recognize it, moving in subtle synchronization. Kale's lips curved into a small, exhausted smile. They were no longer just creatures to fear, they were partners in survival. His mind hummed with both relief and apprehension. He had proven that humans could inspire trust, could protect life, and could make impossible choices. Then, unexpectedly, one hatchling fluttered off Kale's chest, landing lightly on Rathkar's massive snout. The Alpha froze, then tilted his head, sniffing the tiny creature. Kale's breath caught in his throat. The adult dragon lowered his head, eyes softening further, as if the hatchling had bridged the impossible gap. A bond had been formed, not just between human and hatchlings but between human and dragon. Kale allowed himself a moment to breathe. Sweat and dust streaked his face, but he felt a sense of triumph unlike any he had ever known. He had survived fire, fury, and an impossible test of instincts, and in doing so he had shown what humans could accomplish: courage, intelligence, empathy, and determination. The silver-black creature finally spoke, its hiss transformed into a low, resonant sound almost like speech. Kale didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. It stepped back, wings folding, acknowledging him and the pack. Whatever it had been testing, it was satisfied, for now. Kale looked around. The cliff was battered, the ground scorched, but the hatchlings chirped happily, wings fluttering. Rathkar nudged Kale gently with his massive snout, a silent recognition of the bond forged in fire. Kale smiled, exhaustion melting into warmth. But even as relief filled him, the horizon rumbled again. Something massive, ancient, and unseen stirred in the valley below. Rathkar stiffened, wings spreading instinctively. The silver-black creature hissed sharply, alert and ready. Kale's mind raced. This was only the beginning. The survival of the hatchlings, the trust of the pack, and even his own life were connected to a larger mystery, one that had only just begun to reveal itself. Kale hugged the hatchlings tightly, looking up at Rathkar and the silver-black creature. "We'll face it," he whispered. "Together." The Alpha's eyes glimmered, the smaller dragons chirped in agreement, and even the mysterious watcher seemed to acknowledge the human's resolve. He knew the next challenge would be even greater, that danger lurked just beyond sight. But Kale also knew this: humans could rise to impossible odds. They could inspire loyalty, build trust, and act with courage and intelligence in the face of creatures far stronger than themselves. The hatchlings were alive, the pack was wary but restrained, and Kale had proven that a single human could change the fate of dragons. The cliff settled slightly, the tremors fading, but the horizon's shadow lingered. Kale's gaze hardened. Whatever waited beyond the valley was older, stronger, and far more dangerous than any dragon pack. Yet he had learned one unshakable truth: humans could survive, humans could inspire, and humans could shine. And as he pressed the hatchlings close, Rathkar's massive wings raised in unison with the pack, and the silver-black creature stepped forward. Kale realized, this was only the beginning. A larger adventure awaited, one that would test not only courage, but the bonds he had just forged in fire. The hatchlings chirped again, wings flapping with excitement, and Kale's lips curved into a determined smile. Whatever came next, he would face it together.